There are so many great alternate win cons in Magic the Gathering. Drawing out your deck, using commander damage, hitting people with the infect. But the most honest way to win is just hitting them with giant monsters over and over and over again. So that's what we're going to do today in Gruul. With Ruby, the Daring Tracker. And you might look at Ruby and say, hey, is that Little Red Riding Hood really the commander of the giant Stomp People deck? Yes, because Ruby is what we call a dork. Ruby taps for a red or a green mana, but also has haste, which means the turn she comes out, she can already start tapping for mana. She also gets stronger if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, which won't matter most of the time. There's one card that kind of makes it matter. She's really just here to tap for mana and make sure you have guaranteed acceleration. And that's why this deck has a bunch of dorks. It's kind of dork kindred followed by big stompy kindred. I'm talking about dorks like the Birds of Paradise, which taps for 1 mana of any color. Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, and Llanowar Elves, 3 cards that are the same thing and tap for a green mana. Paradise Druid is worse Birds of Paradise because it costs 2 mana, but it also taps for 1 mana of any color. Elysian Caryatid is weirder Birds of Paradise because it taps for 1 mana of any color, but if you have a creature of power 4 or greater, it taps for 2 mana of any color, which is more. And you're going to have creature with power 4 or greater pretty fast. Fanatic of Ronas normally taps for 1 green mana, but it can tap for 4 green mana if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. You can also eternalize it, which means you pull it out of your graveyard, put a token of it on the battlefield that's a 4/4. 4 is 4 or greater, which means that if you do that, it automatically taps for 4 green mana. But you probably won't need to do that because you're probably going to have a different creature that's power 4 or greater. Tender Wild Guide lets you tap it for 1 mana of any color, but it also has Offspring, which means you can get 2 Tender Wild Guides in the same turn. Play it the first time. For more dorks. For more mana. Selvala, Heart of the Wilds lets you pay 1 green mana and tap it to add X mana of any combination of colors, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And also, whenever you play a creature with the highest power, you get to draw a card. That is actually kind of universal. Everyone gets to do that, but mostly you get to tap Selvala for a ton of mana if you have a very big creature, which you should. Circle of Dreams Druid taps for a number of green mana equal to the number of creatures you control. You will ideally be controlling a lot of creatures. This deck has 42 creatures in it. All of those creatures that tap for mana are going to tap for mana even better if you have Leyline of Abundance. This is a Leyline card, which means if you draw it in your opening hand, you can just slap it out for free at the start of the game. Otherwise, it's going to cost you 4 mana, but it makes sure that all of your dorks tap for an additional green mana when you tap them for a mana, which is more mana.
It's free real estate.
We also have some passive ways to get mana or to get discounts, like Goblin Anarchomancer, which discounts your green and red spells by 1 mana. The deck is green and red. Rada, Heir to Keld, adds 2 red mana as it attacks, but mostly just taps for a green mana. Muera, Trash Tactician, gives you a red or green mana during your first main phase, equal to the number of raccoons you have. This deck only has 1 raccoon. Also, when you expand 4, you gain 3 life. That means you spent 4 mana to cast a spell this turn. When you expand 8, you get a little card advantage, exiling the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play those until the end of your next turn. Should help you hit your land drops, or help you find a big old creature to play, or find another dork to help you play a big creature. Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide you can exile from your hand to add a green mana or a red mana. Simian is red, Elvish is green. Omnath, Locus of Mana, makes sure that the green mana you have left over at the end of your turn doesn't go away as phases and turns end, and it also gets +1/+1 on it for every unspent green mana you have. So you can store up a ton of mana on it for the next turn to play something big. Or you can make it huge and then tap Selvala to make it bigger, and also get a ton of mana. Those two go well together. Hulking Raptor adds 2 green mana at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, and it has Ward 2. You're always going to go to your pre-combat main phase. It's going to happen at some point on your turn. Rodeo Pyromancers gives you 2 red mana after you cast your first spell every turn to make sure you can waterfall out some more stuff. Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma, gives you a 2 mana discount on any creatures that have power 4 or greater. And when it attacks creatures with power 4 or greater, get +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. Not having trample can be an issue. It's not really an issue for this deck. A lot of the things in Gruul Big Stompy have trample, because they're big and stompy. And then, of course, we've got your Farseeks, your Rampant Growths, your Threes Visits, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. No Arcane Signet. I did not say Arcane Signet. Leyline of Abundance specifically makes tapping creatures for mana better, so we have less artifacts to tap for mana because we want to tap our creatures. We also have less lands. We only are running 30 lands in this deck, but I've played it quite a few times. Make sure you got 2 lands in your opening hand, and you're guaranteed to stay on your mana curve because you can bring out Ruby. You should be fine with 30 land, especially because, boy, does this deck love to draw cards. I know I've talked about it before and said that green isn't great at drawing cards, but what if I told you that's a goddamn lie? What? Green's great at drawing cards if you're playing big creatures. Beast Whisperer, whenever you play a creature, you draw a card. Garruk's Pack Leader, whenever you play a creature with power 3 or greater, you get to draw a card. That can just be the end of the sentence. Primordial Sage, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Soul of the Harvest, whenever a non-token enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. This is great because we're going to have some ways to cheat out some stuff later. So you won't technically be playing or casting a creature, but you will be putting it onto the battlefield, so that'll cover your butt, and you can still draw the card. Up the Beanstalk draws you a card when you play it, and you also draw a card when you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater. Whether or not you paid 5 mana for that spell doesn't matter. If you cast the spell, you get to draw the card. Colossal Majesty, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you get to draw an extra card. Elemental Bond, whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. This is an enters, this is not a cast. Guardian Project, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control and it doesn't have the same name as another creature, you get to draw a card. That's a lot of extra words in Commander, which is a singleton format, so you will not have multiple creatures that have the same name on them. So it's basically, when the creature enters, you draw a card. So, card draw, that's the only form of card advantage in this deck? Absolutely the F not. O'Hare Coslam has Trample, it's a 6/5. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can look at that many cards off the top of your library and put a creature card and a land card onto the battlefield from those cards. Doesn't matter how much the creature costs, it hits the battlefield. You can get a 12 mana creature out with this if you're lucky, and actually, you don't even have to be that lucky. We put a lot of high mana creatures in this deck. Itali the Primal Storm, when it attacks, each player exiles the top card of their library, and you get to play that spell for free. No paying the mana cost. Just free. It's free. Trumpeting Carnosaur, when it enters the battlefield, you discover 5. Discover means you go through your deck looking for a spell that costs 5 or less. And you get to play it for free, or put it in your hand if you don't want to play it right now. You can also pay 3 to discard it and do 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker, so it's also removal, if you need removal. Annoyed Altasaur has Cascade. That means that you're going to exile cards off the top of your library until you hit something that costs 6 or less, and then you get to play that without paying its mana cost. Birthing Ritual lets you look at the top 7 cards of your library at your end step if you control a creature. Then you can sacrifice any of your creatures and play a creature card from among those 7 cards you looked at that has mana value equal to or 1 greater than the mana value of the thing you sacrificed, just constantly making your board a little bit bigger and a little bit better. And Monstrous Vortex has it so that whenever you play a creature card with power 5 or greater, you get to discover X, where X is the creature's mana value. It's more discovery for free. Also, this can waterfall into itself, and it's pretty likely to, with how high power and high mana value a lot of the cards in this deck are. Now those are all engine pieces, and some of those engine pieces are also big dumb stompy creatures that can do big dumb stompy things, but what is this engine driving? What is the trucks? Let's talk about trucks.
What do we know about our trucks? They're huge.
Ansrog the Quakamole is so incredibly pushed, it's an 8/4 for 4 mana. Oh sorry, I forgot, it has an upside. If it gets blocked during combat, there's another combat. If it doesn't get blocked, someone takes 8 damage. If you're flooded on mana, which probably shouldn't happen, but if you are, you can also force it to be blocked to give yourself extra combat steps. Neat. Cactus Folk Sure Shot, it's got Reach, it's got Ward 2, it's a 4/4, and it makes sure that your other creatures with power 4 or greater have Trample. so you don't have to worry about not getting through. Oh, it's also a haste enabler, so you don't have to wait a turn to attack with stuff. Seedborn Muse isn't actually all that big, it's only a 2/4, but it also means that you untap your permanents on everyone's untap step, which means you've got all of your lands back, but it also means all of your dorks are back, and it also means everything that attacked is now a viable blocker as well. Xenagos, God of Revels, starts off as an enchantment until your devotion to green and red is 7 or greater. Doesn't really matter, we don't want it as a creature, even though it is a 6/5, so you know, it's a big boy. But it lets you choose a creature to double their power at the beginning of combat. Kolga, the Titan Ape, is King Kong. It comes in and fights a creature you don't control, which is great removal. When it attacks, it also destroys an artifact or an enchantment an opponent controls, which is pretty neat. And you can return a human to your hand to give it indestructible until end of turn, which isn't something I do a lot. But Ruby's a human, so you could return Ruby. She's got haste, so when you bring her out, you can just tap her for mana again. Kolga and Yadaro is the Kaiju team-up. It also has Kolga in it. Hey, it's Kolga, the Kolga we just talked about, but it also has Yadaro. When it enters, you can choose to give it trample and haste until end of turn, or you can make it fight another creature, like Kolga. You can also pay 4 mana to discard it from your hand to destroy an artifact or an enchantment, shuffle it into your deck, and then draw a card. That's the Yadaro part of it. 4 mana to destroy an enchantment and draw a card. Not bad. Not bad. Not great. Not bad. If you need it, it's there. Savage Ventmaw gives you 3 red mana and 3 green mana when it attacks, and you don't lose that mana at the end of your combat phase. Hell, if you have Omnath out, keep that green mana through the rest of the turns. Thunderfoot Baloth is the only reason you should ever have Ruby attacking. It's got Lieutenant, which means that when it's out, all of your creatures get +2/+2 and trample. And since it's got power 4 or greater, that also means that Ruby's +2/+2 activates, which makes her a 5/6. So, yeah, when she's a 5/6, maybe swing with her. But you're probably gonna have way bigger stuff, and she's honestly still probably more valuable as a dork. Dracuseth Maw of Flames deals 4 damage to a target when it attacks and 3 damage to 2 other targets. Just go burninating the countryside.
All right, that's too hot. Anything we can do about that heat?
Rick, it's a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Tyrant's Familiar is sort of a fusion between Dracuseth and those thundering Baloths, because it also has Lieutenant, giving it +2/+2 as long as you control your commander, and it deals 7 damage to a creature your opponent controls as it attacks. It also has flying and haste, so it attacks the first turn. You can really surprise people. Greater Hoof Behemoth is an expensive card in this deck, and it's also a win con. When it hits the battlefield, creatures you control get to trample, and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. You're going to have a lot of creatures, and they're all going to be big. And once they start trampling, it's over. It's over! Endray's Forerunners asks the question, what if Craterhoof Behemoth was a little worse, but $40 cheaper? When it hits the battlefield, creatures you control get +2/+2, vigilance, and trample until end of turn. It's not the same +15/+15 that Craterhoof could give, but your stuff's big enough already. Trample and vigilance should clear the game out for you. Terastodon enters and destroys up to 3 non-creature permanents other people control. Those people get 3/3 elephants. Also, it doesn't have to be other people. You can do it to your own lands if you're confident. I've done that before, and it's won me the game. So remember that you can do that with Terastodon. I'm sorry, when are you going to play a card with a fucking beat? The femininomenon reference for Terastodonanon. Terastodonanon. Now, I said we weren't going to do alternate win cons, but what if we did one just as a treat? And just because it's polite to end the game quickly, you know? I would much rather have someone destroy me than sit around and watch them play with their Azorius control shell for 45 minutes without winning the game. Win the game, and you can win the game with Triumph of the Hordes. It gives creatures you control +1/+1, trample, and infect until end of turn. For those who don't know, poison counters kill you in 10, regardless of the 40 life format that you are playing. In fact, makes creatures deal damage to players in the form of poison counters. So if they are a 12/12 and they hit you, you lose. If they're a 10/10 and they hit you, you lose. If they're a 9/9 and you play Triumph of the Horde so they get +1/+1 and they hit you, you lose. When they hit creatures and creatures block them, they get -1/-1 counters instead of taking damage, which makes blocking them kinda suck and kinda make you not do it. But you gotta do it or you die. And sometimes you die anyway. Triumph of the Hordes just do be like that. Triumph of the Hordes is an expensive card, so is Craterhoof Behemoth, so shocker, shocker, shocker everyone, we're over budget. This one's coming in at 204.46, also including all of those fancy lands we got. Hey, Mason, show some fancy lands we got. Stomping Ground and Commercial District, and what's that other one? Wooded Foothills is the last one. But hey, that means when we make a Teamer deck, when we make a Naya deck, we won't have to pay for these again. And we won't have to pay for Craterhoof again. Or Triumph for the Hordes. That'll be fun in Naya. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, subscribe for more. We're making new videos like this all the time. Join the Patreon to support the channel. It's the best place to do it. And you also get to join the Discord, where you can maybe hop into a game of Spell Table and try this deck against me there. Bye-bye!